Welcome to Nice and Blunt. My name's Adam Riancho, and for today's video, we're making win-loss picks for the AFC North, the best division in football, at least last year, but every year is different. Can these four teams compete at the same level? They all finished above 500, even the Bengals, despite missing a lot of games from Joe Burrow. But we're going to start with the Ravens. They have a very interesting schedule, a lot of primetime games, and they kick off week one in the season opener Thursday night at the Kansas City Chiefs, the reigning Super Bowl champs and the team that they lost to in the AFC Championship game. The Ravens have some new weapons, including Derrick Henry most notably, but they also get Mark Andrews back fully healthy, and Zay Flowers should be excellent in year two. The Chiefs have some new weapons on offense, and I expect the suspension for Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy going to have a rough time here. The Ravens win in week one, kind of like the Lions last season. In week one, they pull the upset. Then in week two, I think that's an automatic win in their home opener versus the Raiders. So I'm giving them a win yet again. And then in week three, they travel into Dallas, a tough environment, but I don't think it matters. I definitely prefer the Ravens. They're the better team by a mile over the Cowboys. So 3 straight wins and make it 4 in a row versus Buffalo. The Bills have new weapons, a very different defensive unit, and the Ravens should keep rolling. In primetime, I'm giving them a 4-0 start. September is going to be good for a healthy Baltimore Ravens team. However, in week 5, they have to travel to Cincinnati, and last year, that was the last time we saw Joe Burrow when he played against Baltimore, and I think Burrow gets some revenge. So I'm giving it to the Bengals in division. It's always a tough matchup, and I think the road environment will be too much for Lamar Jackson. So the first L of the year in week 5, a tough loss in that one. But in week 6 versus Washington, battle of rushing quarterbacks, and I think Lamar just has too much experience. I don't think the rookie Jaden Daniels will have enough. So in the home game versus Washington, the Baltimore Ravens get another win. Then on week 7, Monday Night Football primetime matchup at Tampa Bay, and they've beaten Baker Mayfield many times in the past. They will beat him once again. I'm taking the Ravens to go 6-1. Then they travel into Cleveland, a tough road environment, also in division. Anything can happen, and I think they fall to the Browns. This one could definitely go in their favor, but the Browns will be a tough out, and maybe Nick Chubb is healthy at this point. That will be a factor for sure. So second L of the year, both losses in division, but they keep on rolling and hit another 4-game win streak here following that second loss. Week 9 versus Denver, I'm definitely taking Lamar and the Ravens. I think Bo Nix will have some struggles against that elite secondary of Baltimore. So a win in week 9, and then in week 10, Thursday Night Football, prime time at home versus Cincinnati. I don't think they get swept. I think they win that second matchup. A victory in the home game versus the Bengals. In week 11, at Pittsburgh, this is always a tough game. For some reason, Mike Tomlin just has their number, and even if they have the lead, it's never secure against J.J. Watt and that defense. But they're going to play very tough on the road. I'm giving them a win. I think at this point, Justin Fields will be the quarterback, and I'm taking Baltimore a win in week 11. But week 12, they travel into LA against Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers, the Harbaugh Bowl, and kind of similar to that Super Bowl matchup, the Ravens versus the Niners, I'm taking John Harbaugh to get the best of his brother. So give me Lamar. That's the 4th straight win. At this point, they're 10-2 and one of the best teams yet again in the NFL. But a late season bye in week 14 does not help them. I think they're going to be pretty tired at this point, and on a short week of rest, traveling back across the country versus the Eagles, I think Jalen Hurts will have their number. I'm giving it to Philly here, week 13. That's their 3rd L of the season. But then there's some much needed rest in the week 14 bye, followed by a very easy game at the Giants week 15. That one's pretty much automatic in my opinion. If they lose to Daniel Jones, I'd be shocked. I think they're probably going to beat Drew Lock in this one, to be honest with you. So week 15, that's another win. But week 16, I'm not giving them a sweep. over the Steelers. I think they lose week 16, and Mike Tomlin gets the best of them. Their 4th L of the year, but they're not going to lose another game. They get a week 17 Christmas Day matchup on Wednesday at Houston, and I believe they take it home. I'm giving them a win, just like they won in the divisional round over CJ Stroud. But week 18 versus Cleveland, kind of similar to the Steelers and Bengals matchup. In division, they will not get swept. They will win at home versus the Browns, and that is a 13-4 record for the reigning MVP. Lamar Jackson does it again. I don't know if he's going to be the MVP again, but they're definitely one of the top teams in the AFC. 13 wins is competing for that number 1 overall seed. Let's move on to the Browns, though, who put up a very impressive season. Kevin Stefanski was the coach of the year, and it's possible that they're going to be another wildcard team once again. But at the end of the day, you have to believe that Deshaun Watson returns to form. He missed a lot of time last year, and the defense did step up despite having to rely on P.J. Walker, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and most notably, Joe Flacco to close out the season. But I think Deshaun will play the majority of games, but because of his guaranteed contract, if he does get banged up, if he does get hurt, I'm not convinced he plays through pain, and I think he sits it out and says, fuck it, I'm going to stay as healthy as possible as long as I can. So a little bit worried and not convinced Deshaun is actually the player we remember from those Houston days, and it will be tough. But week 1, they essentially get a primetime matchup versus Dallas. Going to be a lot of eyeballs on this one. It's in the afternoon, but it's also Tom Brady's broadcasting debut, and you know Fox wants to highlight it for the national audience. So this is a big game, and I'm giving them the win. I think they do have the better defense than the Cowboys do. That is saying a lot, but I think they're better coached, a little bit more cohesion, and I think early on in the year, Jerome Ford and Deontay Foreman are going to provide a much better rushing attack than Ezekiel Elliott and Rico Dowdle. So give me a win week 1 for Cleveland, followed by a loss in week 2 at Jacksonville, the battle of the former Clemson quarterbacks, and I think Trevor Lawrence proves that he's the better one between the two. So an L on the road, but then a matchup versus the Giants at home, and I think they take care of business. I'm definitely taking Myles Garrett over Daniel Jones. So 2-1, followed by a win on the road at the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm not convinced that Gardner Minshew improves the Raiders offense enough to make them competitive and win a lot of games. So 3-1, a good start for Cleveland, but then some difficult road matchups. They get 3 in a row here. The Raiders, then the Commanders, then the Eagles, all on the road. And I think these return games to the East Coast cost them a little bit. I'm going to take Dan Quinn and the rookie quarterback. I think they shock the Browns a little bit. I think that Jaden Daniels is better than most people give him credit for, and the Dan Quinn defense will give Deshaun some issues. So an L, an upset in week 5, followed by a pretty decent loss at Philly. I think they will compete. It should be kind of close, but I'm definitely preferring the Jalen Hurts offense. I think Saquon will be too much to handle, and the Eagles score too many points. So a loss in week 6, tough game, but it is what it is. They're 3-3 back to 500, and then they come home for a 3-game home stretch. Kind of interesting, 3 road games followed by 3 home games. They get the Cincinnati Bengals at home, and I think they beat Joe Burrow. They've been his kryptonite for the most part, especially when they play in Cleveland. So a win week 7, followed by a home game versus Baltimore, and I think these divisional matchups, these first 2 of the season, are going to be really important, really key games, and I mentioned it earlier in the video, I'm taking Cleveland in this matchup. 2 straight wins. At this point, they're 5-3. But 3rd straight home game, and I think they overlook their opponent just a little bit. Maybe you question my decision-making here, but I'm going to give it to the Chargers. I think there's going to be some weird L's on this schedule, and I think I'm going to take Jim Harbaugh, in my opinion, the better coach and quarterback combo over Cleveland. So a loss to the Chargers, week 9, followed by a week 10 bye. Coming out of it, they get a road game against the New Orleans Saints, and I am not a believer in Derek Carr this year. I have the Saints going 4-13, and this is a loss for New Orleans. The 6th win of the year for Cleveland. So a win week 11, followed by a home game against Pittsburgh, and I'm going to give them an L. They have 2 games against the Steelers in these 3 weeks here, and I think they split the series. I'm going to give them an L at home, but a win week 14 on the road. So they split the series, and in between it, they have a road matchup at Denver. I'm actually going to take Sean Payton. This is a primetime game, week 13, Monday Night Football, one of the only primetime games for the Broncos the entire season. And I think at this point, Bo Nix will be much better than at the beginning of the year. That offense will be rolling, and I think the defense is very underrated. The Broncos can definitely shock you. They beat the Bills last year, and I think this is an upset for Denver. So an L for Cleveland in the middle of a loss and a win against the Steelers. And at this point, they are 7-6, and they need some wins to close out the year. But the last month of the season is a terrible stretch for Cleveland. These 4 games are brutal. Versus Kansas City, I'm definitely taking Mahomes. That's an L. At Cincinnati, I gave them the first one, but I'm not giving them a sweep. I'm going to give them an L. They lose in Cincinnati to Joe Burrow. But in Week 17, this one can really go either way. Weather will be a factor, and Tua does struggle sometimes when wind or snow is present. I kind of want to change my pick, but earlier, a few weeks ago, I gave this game to the Dolphins, and I'm going to stick with my gut. I think the run game, Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane, and Jalen Wright, the rookie, really put forth a good effort, and Mike McDaniel's run scheme gets it done. I think Deshaun Watson crumbles. Give me another L, Week 17 versus the Dolphins. And then Week 18, I don't think they sweep Baltimore. This one's on the road, and I'm taking the Ravens. That's a 7-10 record. These last 4 games are brutal. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can switch that Miami game, the Denver game, and possibly the Commanders game. But even then, that's 10 wins max, and I think that's a little over-optimistic. I do think they're going to shit the bed and get upset by some teams you probably think that they shouldn't lose to. But I don't trust Deshaun Watson to stay healthy. I do think Jameis Winston plays at least 2 or 3 games this year, and if that's the case, they're definitely going to lose in those matchups. So 7-10 is my prediction. Decent, but not good enough in the AFC, a losing record for Cleveland after a year of promise and optimism. Next, let's move on to Pittsburgh, and the Steelers have a lot of questions at quarterback. They gave an extension to Mike Tomlin earlier today, and even if they finish below 500, you know his job is secure. But it feels weird to bet against Pittsburgh. Mike Tomlin always finishes with at least 8+ wins. So let's take a look, but I'm not a believer in Russell Wilson, and I'm not convinced that Arthur Smith really improves their offensive game plan that much. So I'm actually giving them an L week 1, kind of like last year against San Francisco. I think their offense really struggles in the first week of the season, and I think because Kirk Cousins has Michael Penix behind him, the Falcons are going to start off really well, and at home, I'm going to take the Falcons to get some revenge on Arthur Smith. So an L for the Steelers week 1 at Atlanta. But in week 2, I think Russell Wilson cares much more about this game, and I think he wins. I think they do pull the upset against the rookie Bo Nix. The defense steps up, and they're not going to lose 2 in a row. I'm taking Mike Tomlin to get his first win at Denver in week 2. In week 3, their home opener versus the Chargers, and I will give them the win. It's a little too early in the Chargers season to have me convinced that they can handle the Steelers' stout defense. So 2-1, not bad, but I think there's a rough stretch coming up right here. At the Colts, I'm a big believer in Anthony Richardson and Shane Steichen this season, so I'm giving them an L at the Colts. I do prefer Indianapolis by a wide margin on offense this year. So 2-2, 500, but then versus Dallas, this game is in primetime Sunday Night Football, and I'm going to take Dak Prescott and Mike McCarthy. I think their defense steps up, and Russell Wilson really has some problems, takes too many sacks, and ultimately coughs up a game-winning drive at the end of the fourth quarter. So an L week 5, followed by a road game at Las Vegas, and I think the Raiders expose some of the weaknesses of Russell Wilson yet again. So the Raiders are very well coached. They're easy to overlook, and I think the Steelers will mess it up on the road tough matchup here. I think Devontae Adams goes ham. I'm taking the Raiders in upset fashion. That one can definitely go the other way, but I have a feeling Russell Wilson's going to make everyone want to fire him and get him on the bench sooner rather than later. 3 straight L's probably going to do it. Then they get a Week 7 primetime game, Sunday Night Football, against the Jets at home, and usually Aaron Rodgers plays really well against Russell Wilson. He hates him. There's a big rivalry between the two, honestly, and I think it's a great spot to expose him as a fraud. Nathaniel Hackett also wants some revenge on Russ as well. So this is the 4th straight L, and I think we're going to see Justin Fields get some snaps in this game, and the Steelers pivot to him rest of season. I do not believe that Russell Wilson is the answer. They only committed $1 million to him, and I think they're going to bench him if he starts off the year 2-5. So that's my assumption. That's what I think happens. And moving forward, we see Justin Fields as the Steelers' starting quarterback. So in Week 8, I do think they win at home. The entire team is ready and revitalized. They're excited for a new quarterback, and they win against the Giants. A good matchup for Justin Fields to make his first start of the season. So a win entering the Week 10 bye, but 3-5, not a good record. They have a terribly difficult schedule to close it out. Coming out of the bye, they have a road game at Washington, and I think Jaden Daniels is much better than Justin Fields, in my opinion. They're both running quarterbacks, but I'm going to take Dan Quinn and Jaden Daniels. This one is a toss-up, but I'm going with my gut, and I think the Commanders are a bit of a shock this season, and they beat the Steelers. Another L coming out of the bye. After that, they still have all 6 of their division matchups, along with a game against the Eagles and the Chiefs. This close to the season, the last 2 months, are one of the most difficult stretches I think I've ever seen for any single team in the NFL, and it's not going to look pretty. Versus Baltimore, I think they lose. I know Mike Tomlin kind of knows their weaknesses. He has a winning record against them, but I think versus them at home, it's not going to look good, and Justin Fields just doesn't have enough answers against the Ravens defense. So an L Week 11, followed by a win in Week 12. I do think they beat Cleveland on the road. I think they will have some big answers against Deshaun Watson. Maybe it's Jameis Winston, but either way, I think their run game steps up, and I think they shut down, force a lot of turnovers against the Browns. So their 4th win of the season, followed by a road game against Cincinnati. I'm going to take Joe Burrow and the Bengals. I think it's too many weapons to deal with on offense, and I kind of worry that there's going to be some injuries to the Steelers' defense again that cost them some winnable matchups. So an L at Cincy, followed by an L versus Cleveland. I don't think they sweep the Browns. I think they lose the second matchup at home. Then they travel to Philadelphia for the Battle of Pennsylvania, and I trust the Eagles more than I trust Justin Fields and the Steelers. I'm giving it to Philly on the road. I think the Eagles are going to be a nightmare to deal with at the end of the season. So another L at this point, and the season's just getting uglier and uglier, but I don't see them getting swept by Baltimore. I have them winning on the road at the Ravens. Mike Tomlin will not get swept. He knows how to make this game an interesting one. So their 5th win of the year, followed by a Christmas Day game against the Chiefs, and I don't see it happening. I'm going to take Patrick Mahomes, an L for Pittsburgh here. And then last week of the season versus Cincy, I think they get swept by Joe Burrow. As long as he's healthy, I'm going to take the better quarterback. And you can argue with me all you want, but I just really don't trust this offense. The quarterback situation is scary. And other than George Pickens, this offense really relies on Jaylen Warren for some burst. It's like, can Pat Freiermuth bounce back? He had a terrible season last year, and Najee Harris not going to stay with the team more than this season. Najee's not a running back I really believe in either. So Arthur Smith not going to help them, and the defense really needs to step up again. I just think there's too many issues. Russell Wilson going to put them in a hole, and Justin Fields historically is a losing quarterback by a wide margin. His record is terrible, and it's going to look even worse this year. So first losing season in the history of the Mike Tomlin tenure. Good news for him. He's not going anywhere, and he doesn't have to worry about people calling for his job after signing that extension. Next season, they'll have a much better quarterback. Hopefully, it's maybe Dak Prescott. But lastly, let's take a look at the Bengals' schedule. They missed the playoffs, but finished 9-8, even with Jake Browning. And if Burrow can stay healthy, they should be one of the best teams in the AFC. Burrow has never had a full training camp and a proper offseason. When he was a rookie, it was the COVID year. Then he tore his ACL and missed a lot of time recovering. Then he had appendicitis and missed a lot of time. And then last year, he had a calf strain that cost him a ton of reps in August as well. So hopefully the wrist injury is not a factor in his 5th NFL season. And if he actually gets a lot of practice time, I think they're going to get off to a hot start. But no matter what, I think they win week 1 versus the Patriots. The Patriots are not a team anyone is confident in, and I'm definitely taking Cincy week 1 versus New England. But then in week 2, they travel into Kansas City to face off against the Chiefs, and I will not expect the Chiefs to lose 2 in a row. I have them losing week 1 to Baltimore. They're going to beat Joe Burrow in week 2. That is my opinion. So 1-1, but then some winnable games here. I do think they beat Jaden Daniels, the rookie, in week 3. That one should be a good game, Monday Night Football, but I'm definitely taking the Bengals. And then in week 4 at Carolina, a battle of number 1 overall picks. I'm definitely preferring Joe Burrow over Bryce Young. Not a lot of confidence in Carolina is what to expect. So 3-1 at this point, and I think they win week 5. They get some revenge on Baltimore. Joe Burrow actually finishes the game this time and keeps them above water. So close matchup here, but in week 5, they get the win. And then in week 6, Sunday Night Football at the Giants, they're definitely going to beat Daniel Jones and New York. So 5-1 entering a week 7 game at Cleveland. And unfortunately, they lose this one. They usually have a lot of problems when they face off against the Browns in Cleveland especially. So a bit of a kryptonite matchup, and they lose once again. Week 7, their second loss of the year. Then they travel to Philadelphia, and I think the Eagles might be struggling mid-season before finding their footing, and I'm giving them the win. I think the Bengals bounce back and beat Jalen Hurts at home. Then they stay at home versus Las Vegas, and I don't think it's going to work out for Devontae Adams and Gardner Minshew. I'm giving it to the Bengals defense to keep them in check. Another win, followed by a road matchup at Baltimore, and I do not see them sweeping the Ravens. In Baltimore, I'm definitely giving them an L, their 3rd of the year, and this game might decide the division. But in Week 11, I think they bounce back, get back on track. They travel to LA, and I do think they beat the LA Chargers. They have a better roster and offense than the Chargers do. So entering the Week 12 bye, they're 8-3, and I think they win their 9th of the season coming off the bye versus Pittsburgh. With extra rest, extra time to prepare, and a home game, I do think they beat Justin Fields pretty comfortably. But then they get 2 road games. Going into Dallas is always a difficult proposition. The Cowboys are going to be desperate at this point, and they always play better at home. Tough environment. I'm giving it to Dallas, a loss in Week 14 at the Cowboys. But in Week 15, very underrated matchup here. It's a revenge game for Brian Callahan, the new coach of the Titans, former offensive coordinator, and I think he poses some issues for Zach Taylor, and I'm giving the Titans an upset victory. I think they overlooked this matchup a little bit too much, and Tyler Boyd seeks some revenge. So 2 straight L's, an unfortunate loss here, but I think they close out the season on the right foot. I'm giving them a win versus Cleveland, Week 16. They will not get swept by the Browns, so at home they win it. And then in Week 17 versus Denver, I'm giving them another win versus Bo Nix and the Broncos. I think they put up too much points for Bo Nix to keep up with. So good stretch here. And then Week 18, they're praying for a chance at the division title. They have to win versus Pittsburgh on the road, and I think they do. So they finished 12-5, really good record, but not enough to win the division. This is my prediction. I have the Ravens remaining at the top, finishing 13-4, definitely in contention for the 1 seed overall in the NFL. But in second place, I have the Bengals at 12-5. They're going to have the number 5 seed in the playoff wild card, and they're definitely making it back to the playoffs as long as Joe Burrow can stay healthy. I think T. Higgins figures it out, and even despite probably his last year with the team, he contributes enough to get them over the hump back into the playoff picture. But in third place, I have the Browns at 7-10, and the close to the season, those last 4 games are terrible, but I think Deshaun Watson just fumbles it a little bit too much and makes a few too many mistakes. Very critical losses early in the year are a problem for Cleveland. So 7-10, not ideal. And lastly, I have the Steelers finishing in 4th place, 5-12, terrible record. It's just the quarterback situation. I don't trust Russell Wilson, and Justin Fields doesn't give me enough confidence to put them over the hump with a brutal schedule those last 2 months. So rough spot for Pittsburgh. Hopefully their quarterback is much better next year, but a bit of a rebuilding season in store for them in 2024. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content. We'll finish it up with win-loss picks with the AFC West in a couple days, and I'll see you next time. My name is Adam Riancho, and thank you for watching Nice and Blunt.